Hazel stood before the mirror, dressed in the white gown meant for her engagement to Harry. Her heart pounded with hope, not knowing it was the last day she would ever believe in love. Outside the window, the sky was bright, but inside her, something felt strangely dark. She smiled to herself, thinking Harry would finally choose her over everything. They had grown up together, promised to always be there for one another. But in a cold twist of fate, she didn't know he had chosen someone else, her stepsister, Sophie. The house was full of guests, laughter echoed through the halls, but Hazel's fate was sealed in silence. While she waited with trembling hands, Harry was with Sophie, sealing a betrayal that would break her. The people Hazel loved most had conspired to destroy her. And as the sun set, so did the last spark of trust in her heart. She was told to step outside to take a call from Harry. When she did, a black van screeched to a halt, and masked men dragged her in without a word. She screamed, kicked, begged, but the ropes cut into her wrists, silencing her freedom. They drove her to the woods, where shadows danced like demons on the ground. One man pulled out a knife, and in that moment, Hazel knew she had been betrayed. Tears ran down her face as she whispered Harry's name, not believing he'd let this happen. But the man only laughed and said, "Your fiancé paid well for this." Her heart shattered louder than her screams. With one final push, they threw her into the cold river, her white dress floating like a ghost. That night, Hazel died, not in body, but in spirit. But the world had other plans for her. When she opened her eyes, she was gasping in her bed, her fingers clutching the sheets. Everything was familiar. The room, the air, the scent of flowers Harry once gave her. A calendar hung crooked on the wall, and her eyes froze on the date. It was the day of her engagement. She stumbled out of bed, her hands trembling as she touched her face to feel if she was alive. The memories were too vivid, too real to be a dream. Hazel had been murdered, and now she was back. Back to the very moment they planned to ruin her. Her knees hit the floor as she cried, not from fear, but from fury. The universe had given her a second chance, and this time, she wouldn't be kind. Hazel was no longer the quiet, obedient daughter everyone used to step on. She remembered every lie Sophie told, every fake smile Harry gave her. She remembered the silence of her father and the cruelty of her stepmother. They let her suffer, while Sophie shined like gold. But Hazel had returned from the dead, and she would not be silent again. Every tear she had shed would now become a storm. Every smile she gave would now be a blade. And this time, she would destroy them before they destroyed her. Her first step was clear: cancel the engagement. She would tear apart Harry's perfect image in front of everyone. She would make Sophie feel the fear she once did. But more than revenge, Hazel wanted something deeper: freedom. She no longer wanted their love. She wanted justice for the girl who died in the woods. Her mind raced back to Liam, Harry's older brother, the only one who had truly protected her as a child. He had left the city years ago after a fight with Harry, and Hazel never knew why. But now, she felt a pull toward him, a hope she didn't expect to feel. Hazel wiped her tears, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "This time, I choose my own ending." And with that, she rose, not as the victim, but as the storm. Hazel walked down the stairs, her hands cold but steady. The house was already filled with guests for the engagement celebration. Sophie wore a pink dress, her smile fake, but charming to everyone watching. Hazel's father greeted people warmly, ignoring the way his daughter looked pale and distant. Her stepmother glanced at Hazel, eyes filled with silent scorn. No one noticed Hazel's heartbreak, nor did they care. To them, Sophie was the jewel of the family. Hazel was just the shadow. But today, that shadow had woken up with fire in her chest. Today, Hazel would speak, loud and clear. She walked straight to the stage where Harry waited with a rehearsed smile. He held out his hand to her, pretending nothing was wrong. Hazel stared at it, then looked him in the eyes, remembering his betrayal. For a moment, silence fell across the room. Then, she took a deep breath and said, "I'm calling off this engagement." Gasps echoed like thunder, and the room turned to chaos. Harry's face twisted in confusion, then anger. Sophie dropped her glass, the sound sharp and ugly. Hazel continued, "You don't love me, Harry. So, let's not pretend." And with that, she stepped off the stage, leaving their perfect illusion in ruins. Harry chased after her, grabbing her wrist in the hallway. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, trying to control his temper. Hazel yanked her arm free, her eyes cold and filled with truth. "You know exactly what I'm doing," she said. "I remember everything." His face paled, but he quickly covered it with a smirk. "You're being crazy," he muttered. "Don't ruin your own life." Hazel laughed bitterly. "You already did that for me, remember?" Sophie arrived, fake tears streaming down her cheeks, pretending to be shocked. "You're making a mistake, Hazel," she cried. "We're family." But Hazel looked at her like poison. "You were never my family." Back in her room, Hazel's heart beat loudly in her chest. Her hands trembled as she replayed the confrontation in her head. Part of her still ached, still wanted to believe Harry once loved her. But every memory reminded her of how cruelly they tossed her away. She stared at her reflection, no longer the girl begging for love. She was a woman building her own future. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. A single message appeared. "I heard what happened. I'm in town. Liam." Hazel's breath caught in her throat. For the first time in a long while, she felt something that wasn't pain, hope. Liam had once been her safe place. He had protected her when they were kids, always shielding her from Sophie's games. He had left years ago, after a fight with Harry that tore the family apart. Hazel never knew why Liam left without a word, but she remembered the sadness in his eyes. Now he was back, and the timing felt like fate. She texted back with shaking fingers. "Can we meet?" She needed to see someone who had never lied to her. Someone who had once held her when she cried under the staircase. Hazel didn't know what she would say, but her heart was already reaching for him. This time, she would not walk alone into the fire. The news of Hazel's broken engagement spread like wildfire. By morning, every relative, neighbor, and friend had something to say. Some called her reckless, others called her ungrateful. But no one asked why she did it. They didn't care about her truth, only the image they wanted to protect. Her father stormed into her room, his voice full of rage. "You embarrassed the whole family," he shouted, slamming the door. Hazel sat calmly, her fingers folded in her lap. "I saved myself," she replied, eyes not breaking contact. It was the first time she didn't flinch under his voice. "You're selfish, just like your mother was," he snapped, veins pulsing in his neck. Hazel's jaw tightened at the mention of her mother. The woman who once held her hand when she cried, who was now only a memory. "My mother loved me," Hazel said softly. "You never did." He raised his hand, but stopped midair, stunned by her gaze. Hazel didn't move, didn't blink. She wasn't afraid anymore. "You can hit me," she whispered, "but you can't break me again." With that, he turned away, silent, defeated. Hazel sat still, but inside, her soul screamed for the years lost. Later that day, Hazel went to the family lawyer's office. Her mother's will had been sealed away, ignored by her father and stepmother. She had always believed it didn't matter, but now she needed to know. The lawyer handed her a folder, his eyes kind and warm. "You have the right to see this," he said gently. "Your mother made sure of that." With trembling fingers, Hazel opened the papers. Every word told her something she never expected. Everything had been left to her. Not to her father. Not to Sophie. Just her. Her mother had seen through their masks all along. The realization crashed over Hazel like a wave. Her mother had fought for her, even after death. This wasn't just money. It was power. It was freedom from a family that never loved her. Her stepmother's smiles, Sophie's fake tears, Harry's empty promises. They were all worthless now. Hazel's hands gripped the papers like a lifeline. She felt her mother beside her, whispering, "Take your life back, Hazel." For the first time in years, Hazel felt seen. And she would make them all pay for pretending she didn't exist. That night, Hazel received another message from Liam. "Meet me tomorrow." I have something to show you. Her heart beat faster, unsure of what he meant. But she knew she would go. Not just because she missed him, but because she needed someone real. Someone who had seen the real Hazel long before she lost herself. She packed the will into her bag and stood by the window. Outside, Sophie and Harry were laughing in the garden, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. And Hazel was ready to become the storm they couldn't silence. The cafe was quiet when Hazel walked in, her coat pulled tight against the morning wind. She scanned the tables until her eyes landed on Liam, sitting in the corner with 2 cups of coffee. His eyes met hers instantly, filled with something heavy. Regret, pain, maybe both. Hazel's steps slowed as she approached, her heart clashing with memories she tried to bury. They hadn't spoken in years, yet something about him still felt safe. When she sat down, silence settled between them like a blanket they were both afraid to lift. Liam handed her the coffee, his fingers brushing hers, sending a flicker of warmth. I heard what happened, he said, voice low but steady. Hazel nodded, unsure where to begin, unsure how much to reveal. She didn't have to say much. Her eyes already told him everything. I should have stayed, Liam whispered, looking away. Hazel stared at him, the words catching her by surprise. Why did you leave? She asked, the question bleeding from her lips before she could stop it. He looked at her then, eyes clouded with something unspeakable. Because I found out what Harry and Sophie did back then, he confessed, jaw clenched. They were already planning to get rid of you years ago. Hazel's stomach twisted as cold swept over her skin. You tried to warn me? She asked, heartbreaking all over again. He nodded. But no one would listen. Not even your father. Hazel realized maybe she had never been alone, just unheard. The pain she had buried came rushing back in waves. Every smile Sophie had given her now felt like a knife. Every touch from Harry felt like poison against her skin. Her chest ached as if her ribs were caving in. Why? She whispered. Why did they hate me so much? Liam's eyes softened as he reached for her hand. Because you had what they never did, real light, he said. They only shine by stealing from others. Especially from you. Hazel looked down at their hands, her fingers curled around his. For once, the touch didn't hurt, it healed. Liam leaned closer and pulled out an envelope from his coat. These are copies of old messages between Harry and Sophie, he said. Hazel opened the envelope slowly, her hands trembling with fury. Each message was a stab, plans to manipulate her, lies spun for years. They had even joked about her sadness, about how easy it was to trick her. Hazel's tears spilled before she could stop them, but she didn't wipe them away. I'm going to burn them with their own words, she whispered, voice full of fire. Liam nodded, his face fierce with support. You're not alone this time, he said, the promise heavy in his tone. And Hazel believed him, because this time, she chose who stood beside her. Back at home, Hazel found Sophie waiting in her room with crocodile tears. Hazel, I'm so sorry, she began, voice trembling. You must be hurting. Hazel didn't blink, didn't move. She simply stared. She knew this Sophie, the actress, the liar, the venom in silk skin. You're right, Hazel said slowly. I am hurting. But not for the reasons you think. Sophie stepped closer, the mask still on. I just want us to be sisters again. Hazel's smile was sharp. We were never sisters. Just enemies under one roof. And with that, she placed the will and Liam's evidence on the table. Sophie's face drained of color, and Hazel knew war had just begun. Sophie stared at the papers Hazel had laid on the table, her hands frozen midair. The will was undeniable. Hazel owned everything their mother left behind. The screenshots of her messages with Harry were even worse. Lies, betrayal, manipulation, all recorded in black and white. Hazel stood with quiet power, no longer the girl begging for love. She watched Sophie crumble, the confidence fading from her perfect smile. I don't want apologies, Hazel said, her voice like ice. I want you to feel everything I felt when you left me for dead. Sophie's mouth opened, but no words came out. And that silence, was the first victory Hazel had longed for. Hazel walked out without another glance, her heels clicking like thunder. Downstairs, her father stood with a drink in hand, laughing with his guests. He didn't know what storm was coming, what truth would crack the floor beneath him. Hazel stepped up beside him, her presence cutting through the crowd like a blade. She took the mic from the table and cleared her throat. "I have something to say," she announced, and all eyes turned to her. She held up the wool first. "My mother left everything to me, not to this family that never protected her." Gasps spread like wildfire. Whispers stabbed the air. Hazel continued, her voice calm but sharp. "I know the truth about Sophie and Harry." And in that moment, the family's golden illusion shattered. Her father dragged her away from the crowd, fury in every step. "What do you think you're doing?" he snarled, pulling her arm. Hazel looked him in the eye, no longer the child who once feared him. "I'm doing what you should have done. Protecting myself," she replied. "You let them ruin me. You watched them hurt me, and you said nothing." His eyes flickered, but the guilt never came. "You're ruining this family," he hissed, blaming her once again. Hazel yanked her arm back. "No. You did that when you chose them over me." She turned her back to him without regret. And for the first time, he couldn't stop her. Later, Liam found her by the lakeside behind the estate. She was barefoot, the cold grass grounding her in this moment of chaos. He didn't speak right away, only sat beside her and waited. "I'm not sure I can do this," Hazel whispered, her voice small in the night. "You already are," he said gently, watching her face. Her tears slid down quietly, but her shoulders didn't shake this time. "They called me weak my whole life, even when I was breaking just to hold everyone together." Liam reached for her hand again, the silence between them filled with safety. "Then break now," he said. "I'll catch every piece." And Hazel let herself cry, not in defeat, but in release. The next day, Hazel made her first real move. She sent the proof to the media anonymously, exposing Sophie and Harry's lies. Articles flooded the internet. Socialite's sister stole her fiancé, engagement scandal of the year. Hazel watched the fallout unfold with a heavy heart, not joy. This wasn't revenge for satisfaction, it was justice for the girl who died in the woods. Harry tried to contact her, but she blocked every number. Sophie went into hiding, her perfect world burning to ashes. Hazel didn't celebrate, didn't smile. She mourned what could have been. But in the ashes of betrayal, something stronger was growing inside her. A version of herself that wouldn't bow, wouldn't beg, and would never break again. Hazel walked through the quiet park where she and Liam used to play as children. The swing creaked softly in the breeze, untouched and waiting like a memory frozen in time. She sat down slowly, letting the metal chains hold her weight, her eyes staring ahead. The memories rushed back, muddy shoes, scraped knees, and Liam's laughter echoing beside her. They had been inseparable once, two kids clinging to each other in a house that never felt like home. She remembered how he shielded her from Sophie's cruel games and Harry's cold silence. But then he left, and for years she hated him for it. Only now did she know the truth. He had tried to protect her in the only way he could. She closed her eyes and whispered into the wind. Why did it take losing everything to finally feel seen? But the wind gave no answer, only brushed her cheeks like a fading kiss. Liam arrived minutes later, walking slowly toward her like he was afraid she might vanish. Hazel didn't move, but her heart stirred at the sound of his footsteps. He took the swing beside her, both of them rocking gently, side by side in silence. "I remember this place," he said softly, staring at the same horizon. "You pushed me into that bush when I stole your candy." Hazel gave a small laugh, the sound half broken but real. "You cried like a baby for 20 minutes, she replied. "That was before I knew you'd go on to break hearts," he teased, and she smiled, sad but warm. "I only ever gave my heart to people who didn't want it," she said, her voice fragile. Liam turned to her, his eyes steady. "You never gave it to me. Maybe you should." His words echoed like thunder in the quiet evening. Hazel looked down, her fingers gripping the swing's chains. I don't know how to trust anymore, she admitted, the truth slicing through her. I don't expect you to, Liam said. But I'm not going anywhere this time. His words wrapped around her like a soft shield, not pushing, just promising. You didn't ruin me, Hazel whispered, but you left when I needed you. I know, he said. And I've hated myself for it every day. She finally turned to him, her eyes shining with 1,000 unshed tears. I want to believe you, Liam. But I'm so tired of being wrong. He reached for her hand again. Not to take, but to hold. She let him. That night, Hazel stood at her window, watching the rain trail down like veins on glass. Sophie's face was on every news outlet now, her fake persona crumbling under public shame. Harry had been suspended from his company, and his investors were walking away. They were suffering, but Hazel didn't feel joy. She felt empty, like revenge had filled the space grief left behind. Her stepmother hadn't spoken a word since the will was revealed, and her father, always prideful, now avoided her entirely. Hazel didn't miss their presence, only mourned what family should have meant. A knock sounded at the door, and her heart skipped. She opened it to find Liam, holding an old photo in his hand. It was a picture from when they were children, Hazel, laughing in a flower crown, Liam holding her hand. I kept this, he said. Everywhere I went, I kept it. Hazel took the photo slowly, staring at the joy in her younger self's face. She didn't know what was coming, she whispered, tears falling silently. She didn't deserve it, Liam said, voice tight with emotion. Hazel looked up at him, her heart caught in her throat. I want to be her again, she said, a confession wrapped in pain. Liam reached forward, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then let's bring her back. Together. And for the first time, Hazel believed she might be found again. Hazel sat in the grand study, the heavy oak desk between her and the lawyer. The room smelled of old books and dust, the weight of her mother's presence lingering. She held the will tightly, its pages crinkling beneath her fingers as she reread the words. Everything was hers, property, investments, even the family business that had once belonged to her father. Her stepmother's grip on the household was slipping, and Hazel felt the tide turning. But with power came heavy responsibility and even darker enemies. She knew Sophie and Harry wouldn't back down quietly. They were desperate. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sophie, full of threats disguised as concern. Hazel's chest tightened as she realized this war was far from over. Still, for the first time, Hazel felt ready to face it. That evening, Liam came by, carrying a stack of documents and old photographs. They spread everything out on Hazel's kitchen table, piecing together the past like detectives. Among the papers were secret contracts and emails exposing Harry's lies to business partners. Sophie's manipulations were even worse. Fake charity donations and stolen funds. Hazel's anger burned hotter with each revelation, but Liam held her steady. We have the truth, he said quietly. Now we have to use it. Hazel nodded, determination replacing her tears. They began drafting a plan to expose Sophie and Harry publicly and legally. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about reclaiming her dignity and life. And Liam's presence made the impossible feel possible. Days later, the family dinner was a battlefield. Hazel arrived with confidence, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Her father glared, Sophie's smile was brittle, and Harry avoided her gaze. She spoke calmly, presenting her demands clearly and without fear. She wanted her rightful place in the family business and control over her mother's estate. Her father laughed bitterly, calling her greedy and disrespectful. But Hazel remained steady, reminding him of the will's legal power. Her stepmother tried to intervene, but Hazel cut her off with cold precision. The room crackled with tension as old wounds opened wide. Hazel's voice echoed, I'm done asking for permission. I'm taking what's mine. That night, Hazel lay awake, haunted by memories of her mother's warm smile. She wished her mother could see the woman she was becoming. No longer a victim, but a fighter who refused to be erased. Liam's hand found hers in the dark, a silent promise of support. The battle ahead was dangerous, but Hazel no longer feared it alone. She thought of all the tears shed in silence, the nights spent wondering why. Now, those tears fueled her fire, forging a strength she never knew she had. Her heart still ached for the girl she lost, but it beat with hope for the woman she would be. Hazel closed her eyes, whispering, "This is for you, Mom." And for the first time, peace began to grow inside her. The next morning, the news broke like a storm. Headlines screamed about Sophie and Harry's corruption and deceit. Their carefully crafted images crumbled under public scrutiny. Investors withdrew support, and legal actions piled up against them. Hazel watched the downfall unfold, not with glee, but with a heavy heart. She knew their suffering didn't erase her pain, but it was justice. Her stepmother, powerless now, avoided the estate altogether. Her father's calls went unanswered as Hazel finally drew a clear line. She was no longer the girl they ignored and betrayed. She was a woman ready to live for herself. The sun set behind the hills, casting a warm orange glow through Hazel's window. She sat quietly, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace, lost in thought. Forgiveness felt impossible, like a fire she couldn't reach without burning herself. Liam sat beside her, patient and steady, waiting for her to find her own peace. Hazel's heart was a tangle of pain, anger, and hope, all fighting for space. She thought of Sophie's tears, real or fake, and the endless cruelty she'd endured. Could she forgive the people who had hurt her so deeply? Liam reached out, brushing a stray hair behind her ear gently. "You don't have to forgive to move on," he said softly. "Just let go." Hazel closed her eyes, the warmth of his hand soothing her raw wounds. Memories of her mother's kindness flooded her mind, softening the edges of her pain. She remembered her mother's gentle voice telling her to love, even when it hurt. But love didn't come easily to Hazel, not after years of betrayal. She had built walls so high no one could climb them, not even Liam. Yet here he was, breaking through slowly, without force or rush. He held her hand on cold nights, wiped away tears she didn't want to show. Hazel realized that healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about accepting. Accepting that some wounds might never fully close but could still grow scar tissue. She looked at Liam, gratitude and fear mingling in her eyes. "Can I try," she whispered, "to let go a little?" Liam smiled gently, his fingers tightening around hers. "Whenever you're ready," he promised, "I'll be here." They spent the evening talking about simple things, childhood dreams, favorite books. For a moment, the weight of the past lifted, replaced by something fragile and new. Hazel felt the stirrings of hope that she hadn't known in years. She even laughed, a light, shaky sound, at Liam's terrible jokes. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. For the first time, Hazel allowed herself to imagine a future beyond pain. A future where love wasn't a weapon but a refuge. And maybe, just maybe, a place where she belonged. Days passed, and Hazel's strength grew quietly but surely. She worked on rebuilding her life piece by piece, moment by moment. She reopened the estate's gardens, inviting neighbors and friends to visit. Liam helped organize community events, slowly bringing color back to her world. The media attention faded, replaced by genuine smiles and real connections. Hazel found solace in the simple joys: morning sun, fresh flowers, warm tea. But the hardest moment came when she finally faced Sophie one last time. Sophie appeared at the estate gate, humbler and broken than Hazel had ever seen. "I'm sorry," Sophie said, tears streaming freely without pretense. Hazel looked at her, the weight of years in her gaze, and slowly nodded. Forgiveness wasn't a gift Hazel gave lightly. It was a decision she made for herself. She chose to free her heart from the chains of anger and bitterness. The fire inside her still burned, but now it warmed rather than consumed. Liam stood by her side, a constant anchor in the stormy sea of her emotions. Together, they faced the future, uncertain but filled with promise. Hazel knew the road ahead would have its scars and shadows. But she no longer feared the darkness. It only made the light brighter. Her heart, once shattered, was slowly mending into something beautiful. And as the flames danced in the fireplace, Hazel whispered, "This is only the beginning." The courtroom buzzed with tension as Sophie sat alone at the defendant's table. Her once perfect facade was cracked, her eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. Harry paced behind her nervously, their shared guilt hanging like a dark cloud. Hazel watched from the front row, her heart pounding with a mix of sorrow and strength. She had fought hard for this moment, the chance to see truth finally surface. The prosecutor laid out the evidence meticulously, piece by painful piece. Emails, contracts, and witness testimonies revealed the full depth of their schemes. Sophie's lies unraveled, her fake apologies now meaningless in the face of proof. Harry tried to shift blame, but his words fell flat against the mountain of facts. Hazel's eyes burned with tears, not from victory, but from the weight of justice served. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed Sophie and Harry like vultures. They were shamed publicly, their reputations destroyed beyond repair. Sophie's friends turned their backs, and Harry's business partners severed ties. The life they had built on manipulation collapsed like a house of cards. Hazel watched silently, her heart heavy but steady. This wasn't about revenge, it was about healing the wounds they caused. She remembered the nights spent crying alone, the whispered threats that haunted her. And now, those nightmares were finally ending, one truth at a time. Her stepmother's cold silence had become permanent exile from the family. Even her father had no choice but to face the consequences of his blindness. Liam stayed close throughout the ordeal, a steady hand on Hazel's back. He never pressured her to speak or act beyond her strength. His presence was a balm to her frayed nerves, a shield against the storm. One evening, after the trial, they walked through the gardens under a silver moon. Hazel's voice was barely a whisper as she said, "I'm scared of what's next." Liam squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to be. We face it together." Her tears came then, not from sadness, but release. She let herself feel all the fear, the pain, and the hope mingled inside her. For the first time in years, Hazel believed she could breathe without choking on grief. And Liam's smile told her she was never alone in the fight to come. Sophie's punishment was harsh but fair, a public apology, community service, and restitution. Harry faced legal charges and was barred from any future business dealings. Their suffering was not a joyous sight for Hazel, but a solemn closure. She knew the scars Sophie and Harry left on her soul would take longer to heal. But the chains of fear and shame were broken at last. Hazel's mother's legacy was safe, protected by truth and justice. She stood taller now, her voice stronger, ready to reclaim her future. Her relationship with Liam deepened, rooted in honesty and shared pain. They dreamed quietly of a life filled with trust, love, and peace. And Hazel finally understood that true strength was born from forgiveness, not vengeance. The final day of the trial ended with a silence heavy with meaning. Hazel walked outside into the bright sunlight, feeling the warmth on her skin. She closed her eyes and let the tears fall freely, a cleansing rain on her soul. Behind her, Sophie and Harry were escorted away, their chapter closing painfully. Hazel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years lift little by little. She thought of Liam waiting for her, a beacon in the darkness. Her heart was fragile but healing, open to the possibility of happiness. The price of betrayal had been high, but so was the cost of silence. Hazel vowed never to be silent again, not about her pain, her truth, or her dreams. And with that vow, she stepped into the future, ready for whatever came next. The morning light spilled gently into Hazel's room, warming the soft sheets around her. She woke slowly, the quiet calm wrapping around her like a long-lost friend. The heavy burdens of the past year felt lighter now, as if the storm had passed. She sat up and looked out the window, watching the garden bloom in bright colors. For the first time in a long time, Hazel felt free, not just from others, but from herself. Liam's presence was beside her, his hand finding hers without words. Their smiles met, shy but full of promise, a quiet celebration of survival. Hazel thought of everything she had endured: pain, loss, betrayal, and the strength it took to survive. She whispered a thank you to her mother's memory, whose love had guided her like a beacon. And she knew that peace was no longer just a dream, but a new beginning. Later that day, Hazel walked through the estate gardens, now alive with color and laughter. Neighbors greeted her warmly, their respect and kindness a balm to her heart. Liam stayed close, his quiet support steadying her steps and dreams alike. Together, they planted a tree in memory of her mother, a symbol of growth and resilience. Hazel knelt in the soft earth, tears of joy and sorrow mingling freely on her cheeks. She was no longer the girl crushed beneath the weight of family lies and cruelty. She was a woman who had faced the darkest nights and found dawn waiting. Sophie and Harry were gone from her life, their shadows shrinking with every passing day. Her father and stepmother remained distant, but Hazel no longer needed their approval. Her family was no longer defined by blood, but by the love and trust she chose to keep. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, Liam took Hazel's hand. He looked into her eyes, full of tenderness and unwavering devotion. "Hazel," he said softly, "will you marry me?" Her heart fluttered, a mixture of surprise, happiness, and hope that felt new. She had dreamed of love before, but now she knew its true meaning: trust, respect, and healing. Tears glistened as she nodded, her voice catching in her throat. "Yes, Liam. I want to spend my life with you." Their embrace was filled with quiet promises and endless possibilities. The past no longer chained her heart. It set it free. And in that moment, Hazel finally felt whole. Days turned into weeks, and preparations for their wedding began with gentle excitement. Hazel chose to keep the ceremony simple, surrounded by friends who had become family. There was laughter and tears, music and dancing, moments that felt like a dream. She wore a dress her mother had picked out years ago, a bittersweet connection to the past. Liam whispered words of love and strength, grounding her in the present. Hazel's stepsister Sophie, now humbled, reached out with a quiet apology and was gently forgiven. The wounds were still healing, but peace had started to weave through the broken places. Hazel's smile was radiant, a reflection of the battles she'd won and the love she'd found. She knew life wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real, full of hope and endless tomorrows. And that was more than enough. On their wedding day, Hazel stood beside Liam beneath a canopy of blooming flowers. Her heart was steady, filled with a peace she had fought so hard to earn. As they exchanged vows, promises of forever, tears and laughter mingled freely. She glanced at the faces in the crowd, those who loved and supported her. In that moment, the girl who had once been broken felt whole and unstoppable. Hazel whispered a silent thank you to the pain that had shaped her, the love that had saved her. Her future was no longer defined by betrayal or loss, but by hope and resilience. She took Liam's hand, ready to face whatever life would bring. Together, they stepped into the bright horizon, their hearts beating as one. And Hazel finally found the peace she had always deserved.